I never thought the words "I cheated on my husband" would one day define my life, but sometimes betrayal begins long before the first touch. In silence, neglect, and a heart starving to be seen. I married Adam believing love was enough, believing loyalty came naturally when two people promise forever, and for a long time I lived inside that belief with pride, because he was a good man, responsible, calm, respected by everyone, a husband any woman would feel lucky to have. Yet slowly, almost cruelly, I became invisible beside him, standing next to a man who provided everything except presence, whose nights grew longer at work while my days grew emptier at home, whose replies turned into nods, and whose touch became rare and mechanical. And I told myself this was marriage, that patience was love, and silence was maturity. But inside me a loneliness bloomed so deep it began to rot parts of me. I didn't recognize. I tried everything to bring us back. Dressing up, cooking his favorite meals, planning surprises, touching him softly in the dark, but he was always tired, always distracted, always somewhere else. And the rejection wasn't loud or cruel. It was quiet, polite, and therefore more painful. Until one evening when a simple conversation with someone who actually listened felt like oxygen after drowning. And that man who knew my name, my thoughts, my sadness, didn't force himself into my life but slipped into my heart through kindness, through attention, through the dangerous comfort of being understood. And I didn't wake up one day planning to cheat. I just woke up exhausted from begging for love from my own husband. And when the line was crossed, it felt unreal, like watching someone else destroy my marriage while I stood frozen inside my own body. Knowing it was wrong, knowing I would regret it, yet craving the warmth I had been denied for so long. And afterward, the guilt came like poison, heavy and unforgiving. Because no amount of loneliness excuses betrayal. Because Adam never deserved my dishonesty. Because I could have spoken louder, fought harder, or walked away with dignity instead of breaking vows in secret. And every smile I gave him afterward felt like a lie burning my throat. Every shared meal tasted like shame. Every night beside him reminded me that I had destroyed something sacred for a moment of emotional relief. And the worst part wasn't fear of being caught. It was realizing that cheating didn't fix my loneliness. It multiplied it. Because now I was alone with my pain and my sin, trapped between confession and cowardice, loving a man I had hurt in the deepest way possible, learning too late that neglect is dangerous but betrayal is deadly, that marriages don't always end with shouting or hatred, but sometimes with quiet, distance, and unspoken needs, and that the cost of seeking comfort in the wrong place is a lifetime of regret. Because even if forgiveness is granted, innocence never returns, and the words, "I cheated on my..." After the betrayal, life did not explode the way movies show it does. There were no immediate confessions, no dramatic confrontations, no slammed doors or packed suitcases. There was only silence, heavy and suffocating, stretching through my days and nights like a punishment I could not escape. Because Adam remained the same gentle, decent man he had always been, waking up on time, asking if I had eaten, reminding me to lock the door, smiling at me with a trust that felt like knives pressed against my chest. And every small kindness made the guilt sharper, deeper, more unbearable. Because how do you live beside a man who believes in you completely while you carry a secret capable of destroying him? And I tried to convince myself that if I ended it quickly, if I buried it deep, if I became a better wife from that moment onward, maybe the damage could be undone. Maybe the sin could be erased by silence and effort. But guilt is not something that listens to logic. It seeps into everything, into shared meals, into late-night conversations, into the space between two bodies lying on the same bed yet worlds apart. And the man I betrayed, the one who listened, who made me feel visible, slowly became a ghost I couldn't escape. Not because I loved him more, but because he represented the version of myself that crossed a line and could never return to innocence. And I cut him off, blocked him, erased every trace, yet his absence did not heal me. It only forced me to face the wreckage I had created on my own. And then one night Adam held my hand while we watched television. A simple, ordinary gesture. But I broke inside because I realized how deeply I still loved my husband. How badly I had failed the man who never stopped choosing me. And for the first time the question was no longer whether I would get caught, but whether I could live the rest of my life pretending. Because every day I stayed silent, I was lying again. And confession began to feel less like destruction and more like the only path toward truth. Yet fear chained my tongue, fear of losing him, fear of being judged, fear of becoming the woman everyone whispers about, and weeks turned into months with this war raging inside me. Until the cracks began to show, my silence grew heavier, my smiles weaker, my eyes distant. And Adam noticed. Of course he did, because despite everything, he was never blind. And one evening he asked me softly, "Are you unhappy with me?" And that question shattered what little control I had left, because the answer was complicated and cruel and unfair. And instead of honesty, I chose cowardice again, telling him I was just tired, just stressed, just overthinking, and he believed me. And that trust felt worse than any punishment, because I realized that love does not protect you from hurting each other. Sometimes it only gives you more ways to do so. And then fate, or karma, decided to intervene in its own merciless way. When I discovered I was pregnant, and joy and terror collide. It ends with accountability, with the understanding that some mistakes change the shape of your life forever, that love after betrayal is quieter, slower, more fragile, but also more conscious. And whether our marriage ultimately survives or not, this chapter taught me the most painful lesson of all, that attention should be asked for, not stolen, that loneliness should be spoken, not hidden, and that the cost of one moment of weakness can echo through years of effort. Because cheating does not begin with desire, it begins with silence. And redemption, if it exists at all, begins with truth and the willingness to live with its consequences. What happened after the truth came out was not dramatic in the way people imagine betrayal stories to be, because Adam did not scream or throw things or walk out that night. Instead, he grew painfully quiet, as if every word he might say carried too much weight, and that silence became the new language of our home, heavier than the guilt I had already been carrying, because now it belonged to both of us. And the days that followed felt unreal, like we were actors trapped in a life neither of us recognized anymore, moving around each other carefully, politely, afraid that one wrong sentence might cause everything to collapse. And I watched the man I loved grieve not just my betrayal, but the version of me he thought he knew. Because infidelity does not only break trust, it fractures identity, forcing the betrayed person to question their own judgment, their memories, and even their worth. And I saw that confusion in Adam's eyes every time he looked at me, as if he were searching for the woman he married and finding a stranger instead. And the worst part was knowing that this pain was entirely my doing, that no apology could undo it, that remorse does not reverse damage, it only acknowledges it. And nights became the hardest, because we slept on the same bed yet miles apart, our bodies stiff, our backs turned, the space between us filled with unasked questions and unanswered fears. And sometimes I could hear him crying quietly, trying to hide it. And those moments broke something inside me that will never fully heal, because there is a special kind of cruelty in being the cause of someone else's silent suffering. And eventually Adam asked for distance, not separation, just space to think, to breathe, to understand what he felt without my presence influencing his decisions. And I agreed, because for once I knew that love meant stepping back instead of holding on. And during that time, I faced myself in a way I never had before, stripped of excuses, stripped of justifications, forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that while loneliness may explain my weakness, it did not excuse my betrayal. And I began therapy, not to save my marriage, but to understand